Okay, now, hey, Jamal, I want to pronounce your last name right because I don't want to get into a fight, you know what I mean, where I know I'll lose, you know what I mean? So please tell me your last name.
Charlo.
Jamal Charlo. So please tell me your last name.
Charlo.
Jamal Charlo. So please tell me your last name.
Charlo.
Jamal Charlo is on the...
What's up, folks? Just finished watching the Jamal Charlo fight with Brandon Adams, and I'll get into that later. And it is Charlo. I mean, the man told you in the beginning of this video, it's Charlo, not Charlo. So why haven't the rest of this world gotten it right outside of me and the twins and on occasion Mauro Ronaldo, who just continues to get on my nerves. Anyway, if you take a look at the Junior Dorticos knockout from a few weeks ago, and you take a look at the Devin Haney knockout from last month, and you take a look at the Jermell Charlo knockout from last week, all of those knockouts are better than Deontay Wilder versus Dominic Breazeale. Remember, Breazeale got up at the count of like 9.5, 10. He was in no shape to continue, but the Devin Haney knockout, man, that guy was out. I saw that live, and I played replays of it on another video. You could argue that Gennady Golovkin's knockout of Steve Rolls is better, but I won't throw that one into the category. The Charlo knockout from a week ago, man, I mean, that dude was stretched out, but the Junior Dorticos knockout over Andrew Tabiti, man, goodness gracious. If you haven't seen that, look that one up. Anyway, this one guy, Wilder's knockout is the best of the year, and that's all that needs to be said. And I'm like, nah, bro. Breazeale got up. I mean, it looked nice, you know, the contact, the connect was fire, but no, it's not the knockout of the year, and we only halfway through, and you got probably 5 candidates better than that. All right, let's move on. Can someone good job of commentating for Charlo versus Adams tonight, but can someone check to see if Paulie Malignaggi is a Gemini? If not, has he been replaced? If not, does he have a twin? I mean, before his bare knuckle fight, he's dropping F-bomb after F-bomb. He's talking, he spat on the guy and said if his mom was in the audience, he spit on her too. And I'm sitting there like, dude, I mean, there's trash talk to sell a fight, and then there's just crossing the line. I mean, let alone the aftermath of how he was talking to McGregor. I mean, I just don't get it, because you see him a week or two later and he's commentating, and it's like it's like he's going to win an Emmy. He's going to be an Emmy award-winning commentator if he hasn't won one already. But man, I mean, did you hear the trash talk and just the antics? See the antics before his bare knuckle fight? a couple of weeks ago. I mean, come on, Paulie. You're better than that, Paulie. You're better than that. Anyway, speaking of a guy who's delusional with his trash talk, Keith Thurman Jr., my God. And listen, Keith Thurman Jr. should beat Manny Pacquiao. He's in his prime. He's young. Pacquiao's old. He's 40-year-old man, 40-year-old plus. Got a lot of mileage. And when I say a lot of mileage, I believe it will be the 71st fight for Manny Pacquiao. 72nd, 73rd, something like that. That's mileage. He's been stopped 3 times, I believe. Was it 4? I believe it was 3 times. A lot of mileage. And he's not he's not known for his defense, even though he's better defensively than he gets credit for. But Keith is just talking as if this is going to be a walkover. So much so he said he's going to bet $10,000 on himself that he'll knock Manny Pacquiao out before the 3rd round. I think like by the end of the 2nd or something like that. But 70, I believe it's 70. This would be his 72nd pro fight. Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's 70, 71, 72, 73. I mean, that's a lot. And I'll even give you a better example of mileage. Manny Pacquiao fought his 50th fight before Keith Thurman Jr. turned pro in 2008. He was on fight number 50. And I'm sorry, he fought fight number 50 before Thurman Jr. fought fight number 1 in the pros. I think Manny fought Antonio Barrera. So the sad thing about this fight is there's no VADA testing. And I've always everybody's pointing Manny, and then the line all of a sudden changed when the week that no VADA thing was announced. All of a sudden the line changed from Thurman being a decent favorite to now it's almost even money. But I've always been suspicious of Thurman, to be honest. When I saw how he blew up before, was it Danny Garcia or Keith Thurman? I mean, was it Danny Garcia or Sean Porter? I can't remember. And how just weeks later he just went from a fat boy to being cut up and all muscle. And I'm like, I don't know. He's done that a couple of times. Just the weeks that you saw the weight come off and then the cuts come in. It just... Anyway, I've always been a little suspicious. By the way, I thought he lost the Porter fight, and Garcia fight could have went either way, but that's beside the point, right? Saul Alvarez was upgraded this week to something called the franchise champion. All in the name of that dollar. Speaking of the almighty dollar, how about Premier Boxing, guys? Free TV, right? Wrong. When Manny Pacquiao fights Keith Thurman Jr., it will be and then later on when Deontay Wilder fights a rematch with Louis Ortiz, it will be 6 pay-per-views in like what, 10 months, 11 months, something like that. So much for free. So Gennady Golovkin negotiations have hit a snag. And one of the main reasons is due to real estate. You know what they say about real estate, right? Location, location, location. Well, Gennady said, I'll fight you. I'll even make the same mistake, if you will, that I made in the prior 2 fights. I'll give you a lot of concessions, but one concession I want. Let's have the fight anywhere but Las Vegas. And when I say anywhere, I think Gennady Golovkin would fight Saul Alvarez in Mexico before he would fight him in Las Vegas. And that's a sticking point. Alvarez won't do it. Oh, but you'll fight Rocky Fielding in New York. But no to Golovkin. Has to be in Vegas. So that doesn't look like it's going to happen in September. He actually might fight Sergey Kovalev. And I'll get a little more into that in a minute. I'm going to talk about the Charlo brothers. Well, speaking of that, well, let's start with Jermell Charlo. Prior to some fights, Jermell Charlo has had this, they both have, but Jermell has had this mysterious lump on the right side of his face, and it showed up again during the weigh-in of his last fight. Ironically, when that lump shows up, as it did last week, and with Erickson Lubin, and with Charles Hatley, Jermell destroyed all 3 of those guys. I didn't see that lump prior to the John Jackson fight, or the Austin Trout fight, or the Tony Harrison fight. And ironically, once again, he struggled badly in all 3 of those fights. His brother fights. His brother fought, and I checked the weigh-in out, and I didn't see the lump on his face as I did prior to the Julian Williams fight. So, and not to say Brandon Adams is a pushover, but Charlo struggled. He struggled, and well, I'll get to that in a second. For Jermell, I wouldn't be as perplexed if the lump showed up on both sides of his face. Then you could say, well, it's his face being drawn out from having to lose weight before he stepped on the scale. Then you could say, yeah, that's what it is. But on one side of his face, and always on that right side, as with the Lubin fight. And I mean, if you remember the Lubin fight, people thought Jermell had a broken jaw at the weigh-in, like he must have got hit hard in sparring, but he was just going to fight Lubin with a broken jaw. I mean, the thing was the size of a baseball. Okay, let's move on. So there's oh boy. So there's a new WBC champion in the middleweight division. Saul Alvarez was basically stripped of his title and given a new title of franchise champion. So now they make Saul Alvarez this franchise middleweight champion and make Jermall Charlo the full world champion for beating who? nobody. So they continue to protect and bend over backwards for Canelo. They try to force a fight between Charlo and Triple G if he's supposed to get a belt before earning a third fight with Canelo, as they said he should do. They get another sanctioning fee by adding another level to their title. Ironically, this happened days before Charlo fought tonight. And I'm sure he'll have to pay said sanctioning fee. Great timing by the WBC. They've ruined a chance for the Alvarez-Charlo fight, it seems. This BS basically excludes Canelo from any obligations as a champion. I mean, they'll let him do whatever he wants on a case-by-case basis, as they put it in their write-up. He can walk around and call himself the champ and not be obligated to fight a mandatory. Basically, the WBC stepped in and they stepped to Canelo and said, look, you gonna fight this guy, Charlo, or what? You know, any chance you fight him in the next year and a half or something? And he said no. And he said, all right, well, here's our plan. So they create this belt for him as to reward him, and Charlo, by the way, while weaseling an extra sanctioning fee from both. And I bet with this franchise title, sanctioning fees will also slightly increase, which will wind up paying for somebody's flight and hotel during vacation season, which is now. So I studied it a little more, and guess what? It makes even less sense. Okay, I mean, a sanctioning body getting fees makes sense. I get that part. They're crooked. They're money hungry. They're greedy. And I also understand the WBC is in bed with certain promotions I won't name. Premier Boxing. You got Rigondeaux getting a title shot next. You got Wilder, who's been receiving favoritism. I get that. I get that. That stuff, all of that stuff, I understand. It's also in bed with Saul Alvarez because he's the #1 American breadwinner, which means money, big money. I get that. Okay? So I get that. I get adding a sanctioning fee, being in bed with certain promotions and certain fighters, and the American cash cow. Alright. Here's the part that gets me though. So if Canelo Alvarez, Saul Alvarez, moves up a weight class, he becomes the franchise champion of that weight class also. Rumor has it, in September, he'll fight Sergey Kovalev. You say Kovalev, however you want to say it. And he won't fight Golovkin because G wanted the fight to be anywhere but Vegas. Like I said, he would have settled for Mexico. So if Alvarez leapfrogs the division, does he become the franchise guy in that new weight class? The answer is yes. In this case, if he fights Kovalev, what it means is Alvarez would be 2 weight classes above middleweight, and that's fine. He's a big dude. Don't be fooled by the stuff he took to make 155 and all that other stuff back in the day. So he would be jumping 2 weight classes, thus making him the light heavyweight franchise champion, which means he leapfrogs Vosdik as the man in the division. Come on, man. Like, that's BS. So if he does that, then what happens at middleweight? Do you move Charlo up a second time for no reason without fighting anyone and make him the franchise champion? And then you move an Andrade or a Golovkin or whoever Charlo's current mandatory is up to the full champion while Charlo gets the franchise tag? And so now he, meaning Charlo, doesn't have to fight his mandatory, which, as was the case with Alvarez, the answer is no. This is oh man, I hate cursing, but this is bullshit. So, in a scenario where Charlo were to fight Canelo, okay, which doesn't look like it'll happen now, but just entertain me for a minute. If Jamal Charlo were to fight Saul Canelo Alvarez, and if Charlo were to beat Alvarez, he becomes the new franchise champion, right? Oh no. He gets what you call the diamond belt. And I still don't know what the heck that is. So, as the diamond champion, that puts Charlo in line to fight for the WBC belt against who? Himself? I mean, is Charlo going to fight himself? Because he was the champ, right? So Charlo would then fight himself, no? Okay. Then would he fight Alvarez in a rematch? Well, no. Alvarez lost to Charlo, so he can't be the diamond champion. But he remains the franchise champion, right? So I guess Charlo would fight himself. Or do they make the belt vacant and install 2 guys to fight for the right to face Charlo, thus making the winner the interim WBC champ? I mean, come on, guys. Help me out with this. Help me understand this. This is nonsense. And you know what? Nobody's going to care. This bum puts on a t-shirt and says, I worked hard for you. You think other people didn't work hard? I worked hard for this. Worked hard for what? You were gifted what they say, the full WBC champion, middleweight champion. It's like, come on, man. You think dudes who have belts didn't work hard for that? This is it's sickening, but what are you going to do about it? Nothing. You're going to sit back and you're going to accept it just like the rest of the world. So don't get mad at me when I criticize it unless you're going to do something about it. And what you need to do is just be critical of it too. Get on your channel and talk about it. Anytime a microphone is put in front of you, talk about it. Anytime you have a chance to interview someone, even remotely connected to it, talk about it. So let's talk about the fight tonight in closing. it was a good fight for both guys. For Brandon Adams, it was a new experience for him. He didn't let his hands go enough. I think Charlo had a lot to do with that. Brandon came in. He wanted to make a name for himself. He wanted to survive, and he did that. And he held his head up high, and he did what he could. When you look at the fact that Brandon is probably 5'8", and young Maul is probably 6 foot, give or take an inch both ways for each guy. Let's just use those numbers. That's a 4-inch height advantage. If you ever play basketball and you got a 6'2" guy trying to score on a 6'6" guy, I mean, it's not as easy as it looks. And not to mention the reach advantage. That's tough. That's like when Crawford fought the guy. He had a brother. What was his name? The kid that got shot. And oh boy, what was his name, man? Jose Benavidez. And Crawford is like 5'8", and Jose Benavidez is like what, 6'1", 6'2", something like that. I mean, on television it didn't look. I mean, just TV is like just it just didn't look that way on television. But he had to deal with a big time height and reach advantage, and people are like, man, well, why don't Bud just go in there and get him? But it's not that easy. So I thought Brandon did well. It's a learning experience for him. And for young Maul, this is his second fight, I believe. Is it his second or third fight at the weight class? And he's realizing that, yeah, you got some pop, you got some power, but you're just not going to flatten guys like you're used to doing. And so he looked terrible in his last fight, and he lost to Matt Korobov. I mean, look, why don't you guys just give me that? Can somebody just leave a comment down there and give me that Jamal Charlo lost to Matt Korobov? Just give me that much. You give me that, I'll try my best not to mention it ever again. And he's still learning. A lot of these champions, or so-called champions, I don't care whether it's Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder, Gervonta Davis, a lot of these guys are really contenders that are still in the learning phase, but they're champions. They're or so-called champions, and they're still learning. If you look at Jamal, I mean, you see technical flaws all over the place. He's still getting hit. Korobov didn't quite hit him. He used that slide left hand. He was scoring, not hitting him. And then with Brandon Adams, he just didn't have the power. But you can see that Jamal is not the hardest guy to hit. And Jim Gray, who was out of line once again, talking about Golovkin ducking him, and Alvarez. Well, he can. I'll give him the Alvarez thing, because the WBC created a way for him to duck or dodge, whatever you want to use it as. But dude, Golovkin ain't ducking nobody. Like, he doesn't need him. It's if you want to call it dodging, that's fine. But he hadn't done anything to earn a shot at either one of those guys. He just got installed as whatever he was, and he won a couple of fights against guys he should have beaten. But you can see technical flaws, big time. Just look at the times he got hit tonight and go back to the Korobov fight, how many times he got hit. So he's another champion or so-called champion in this case, who's learning on the job. He really a prospect or a contender who happens to have a belt, but still has to learn. I mean, you could argue he lost against Austin Trout. Okay, he was getting tagged by Julian Williams in their fight, so he needs to keep. Don't just rely on that power. And see, the best thing that happened to him is back-to-back fights where he didn't get a stoppage, because that's going to show him, listen, I can't just rely on these hammers all the time, these big cannons. I have to work on other parts of my game, especially defensively. He's used to taking one and then throwing a shot and getting the guy out of there. When you start fighting some of these hard hitters and guys who can take as well as they can give, it's going to be a problem. It's going to catch up to him one day. So he needs to keep working on getting better and not necessarily getting stronger and trying to knock guys out. So it was good for both of them. Very good fight for both of them. That's about it. I've talked long enough. The WBA and the WBC are a disgrace. I'm an IBF and WBO guy. I like the IBF. I'm a Jersey guy, and the IBF started in Jersey and is still based in Jersey. When you look at the WBC, it's Mexican. So you got Alvarez, you got Ruiz, and then you have Premier. And listen, brown paper bags are being exchanged by promoters, and by promoters to commissions, and promoters to most certainly the sanctioning bodies. And the IBF isn't without its corruption. If you go back to the early 80s, look up the name Bob Lee. I mean, it had its scandal, but I'm just an IBF guy. I mean, they're not, I'm hoping they don't sell out, but they don't have, like, let's say there were 10 weight classes. So the WBC has about 50 belts, with your interims and your in recess and your emeritus and franchise and diamond and all that. Same with the WBC. But see, the IBF, if there were 10 weight classes, the IBF had like 11 belts. And I'm using the number 10 just as an example. I know there aren't 10 weight classes. There I think there's 17 weight classes with the minimum weight. I think it's 17. For some reason that number. So when you got 40 and 50 belts, no, you should have 17. But anyway, so that's basically it. I'll be going to the Teofimo Lopez card, and that's in a few weeks, right? And I don't have the boxing schedule in front of me, but Let me know what you think below about the WBC and this franchise crap. And let me know what you think about Charlo just being gifted the he's the real WBC champion, and how it was basically a vacate by Alvarez. And just let me know your feelings on that, and anything else you want to talk about. Catch you on the next one.